Hello everyone, my name is Kira Kaplan, and today I'm going to be presenting to you a project on the shades of light and darkness in Lily Boulanger and her song cycle Clairière dans le ciel. Throughout history, the majority of scholarship has entirely focused on composer Lily Boulanger's disability due to her chronic illness and how her work was affected by her physical fragility. Scholar Annegret Fauser asserts that the only real reason Lily Boulanger won the Prix de Rome was due to her exploiting an image as a femme fragile, and less in part to her own merit and musical achievement. Similarly, in her dissertation on Lily Boulanger, musicologist Anya Hollenberry makes the point that Lily's contribution to society was as a, quote, good sufferer and a ill, graceful, and humble child who primarily identified with the image of femme fragile. I argue instead that Lily Boulanger's life was marked by both light and darkness, immense strengths and weaknesses, and her remarkable talent for conveying this range of vulnerabilities in her compositions. I believe that the cycle can be interpreted as a complex autobiographical statement. Throughout this song cycle, Boulanger does not shy away from the difficult reality of her illness and impending death. She instead uses it as material to fuel her musical style. I argue that it is our duty as modern musicians to recognize the autobiographical nature of this cycle and to seek out the ways in which we can more properly communicate the abundant complexity of Boulanger's character. She wrote her music with intentionality, personality, and strength, and her music should be performed with all the specificity that she desired, rather than just with one-dimensional passivity only concerning her illness. By performing through an autobiographically informed lens, we can surpass the sexism and ableism of her time to truly honor Lily's legacy not as a weak woman with a disability, but as a complex and revolutionary female composer with a message. Lily's identity as an individual and composer was directly tied to her illness from an early age. At age 2, Lily developed a severe case of bronchial pneumonia from which she was doubted to survive. Though she wasn't killed by the virus, as a result of it, she would spend the rest of her life suffering from a shattered immune system and was very quick to catch any kind of infectious viruses or diseases. In addition to her exceedingly low immunity, she was also diagnosed with intestinal tuberculosis, which today we now call Crohn's. Though outwardly she would appear frail her entire life, she showed throughout her childhood that she possessed a passion for life that was evident only to those closest to her, as cited by biographer Leonie Rosenstiel. Rosenstiel says, in spite of her frequent bouts with illness, Lily was an affectionate child with an active sense of humor. She reveled in the atmosphere of camaraderie and warmth, and greatly enjoyed the practical jokes that prevailed among the Boulanger family, their friends, and neighbors. This gaiety was shared with only her closest friends, however, and most of those who knew her superficially found her to be an intense but extremely serious child. Her determination in pursuing a musical career was an uphill battle from the very beginning because of this illness. Lily was forced into isolation much of the time due to her health. Rosenstiel states, there was a constant conflict between Lily's desire to escape from what she came to view as the prison of her ill health and her recognition of the practical medical necessity of avoiding possible exposure to the diseases against which her weakened immune system had no immunity. Lily was determined not to let her illness define her, though, and she demonstrated further strength through her path to eventually winning the Prix de Rome prize. She initially entered the competition in 1912, but was forced to withdraw before completing the final round due to a relapse of her illness. Despite what seemed like a colossal setback, after returning from recuperation, Lily immediately set about going back to work to compete in the following year's competition. In the Prix de Rome competition of 1913, just 1 year later, the odds were horrible against Lily. The competition at this point was incredibly grueling and anxiety-inducing, even for someone in perfect health. Still, Lily persisted to the very last of her strength, despite physical exhaustion, even having to enlist a friend's help to write out the final presentation copies of the score for the jury because she was so weak. With the presence of the obstacles of her health, her lack of experience, and the sheer fact that she was a woman, Lily Boulanger still became the first female composer to win the Prix de Rome in 1913. Her eventual win of the Prix de Rome set a new precedent for the future, ensuring that women composers would no longer be prohibited from the esteemed Villa Medici. The magnitude of her win was emphasized in a statement by reporter Émile Veillermoz. "Do not be fooled. The steed stands on its own merits." Not only did the gallantry of the judges not intervene to facilitate her victory, but it could be said that they were stricter with this young girl of 19 than with her competitors. The misogyny of the jury was known. The entry of an Eve into the earthly paradise of the Villa Medici was dreaded by certain patriarchs as the equal of total catastrophe. Lily Boulanger began her composition of the song cycle Clairière dans le ciel soon following her win of the Prix de Rome in 1913. The song cycle is based off of a set of poetry by Francis Jammes entitled Tristesse, given to her in a book as a gift by her close friend, Miki Piret. The poetry of Jammes allowed Lily to speak through her music in a clear way that reflected the truth of her own emotions. There are many aspects of Francis Jammes' poetry that attracted Lily to set them as a song cycle, particularly his attachment to symbolism, interpretation of love as something more than physical, and attention to a wide range of emotions. Scholar Mary Beth Kyriakos investigates the symbolism and how Lily incorporates it stylistically into the cycle in her dissertation entitled Clairière dans le ciel by Lily Boulanger, a historical and stylistic study. She also asserts that it was Jammes' gentle use of symbolism that drew Lily to his poetry, and that she adapted it to fit the frame of her life story. During her long bouts of isolation because of her illness, Lily found herself expanding her repertoire. Symbolist writing portrayed authentic human emotion, often through nature, artfully doing so in a subtle way under a veil of ambiguity that could lead to deeper reflection. As someone who was subject to both emotional and physical confinement for most of her life, it's no wonder that Lily Boulanger was strongly attracted to the poetry of the symbolist movement. It was a way that she could express and confront the overwhelming and complex feelings she encountered in her short life. I would argue that based on Boulanger's selection of poems to set to music, she perceived the cycle as a kind of autobiographical statement. As you can see in this figure, excerpted from Kyriakos' dissertation on Boulanger, there were originally 24 poems in Jammes' cycle, but Lily chose to set only 13 of them. Curiously, the subject matter of the poems she left out often had to do with the kind of concrete physical love between the narrator, who was a man, and the heroine, a woman. In addition, there are instances throughout the cycle, including the number of chosen songs, that allude to Lily's obsession with the number 13. The specific number and type of poems Lily chose were possibly a hint to listeners who truly understood her. It's possible that since Lily never had any romance in her life due to her illness, she did not feel compelled to compose about it. The poet's memory of the heroine symbolizes Lily's remembrance of the strength and energy that music and composition brought to her life. The loss signifies Lily's gradual decline from composing, her grief for a life she knew would soon end, and sympathy over the pain her family would feel upon her death. The physical and personal characteristics shared by Boulanger and the heroine in Jammes' poetry also suggest an autobiographical connection. Both Boulanger and the heroine were, quote, tall, lanky, and fragile with pale, almost transparent skin. The clothing described by the poet even appears to be similar to the long, flowing, often white dresses that Lily would wear. Emotionally, Lily Boulanger is characterized similarly to the Tristesse heroine as well. Just like the unnamed heroine, Lily was known to be innocent, modest, and unendingly faithful to her loved ones, as we can see quoted in the poem. On a surface level, Lily creates unity in the song cycle through key areas of song. Upon closer look, you can see that she used key areas to designate her strongest moods and feelings. The key of E major plays a significant role in the music, specifically in songs 1, 2, 4, 5, and 8. Not only are each of the songs in E major, as seen in the diagram below, but they also present a general mood of happiness and remembrance. Continuing with this line of thinking, the minor keys of A, F, and D are reserved for poems containing more somber subjects. Songs 3, 6, 12, and 13 all consist of subject matter relating to loss. Throughout the cycle, a recurring motif of the descending second, both major and minor, appears, ultimately in 10 of the 13 total songs. The entire cycle itself could actually be seen as one big descending second, since the first song of the cycle, entitled Elle est descendue, begins in E major. The next few songs stay in E major, and then it kind of goes back and forth in similar keys before finally resting in the final song, Demain fera un an, in the key of D minor. This motive showing light, E major, and a descent into darkness, D minor, symbolizes Lily's struggle with illness and the battle she bravely fought along the way. I would argue that the first song of the cycle, Elle était descendue, embodies Lily's happy memories of youth and her family's summer home in the beautiful Garganville, and should be performed with such nostalgic energy. The text speaks of frolicking freely in the meadows, and the heroine who, quote, with an awkward grace particular to tall, lanky girls, climbs a hill to reach the top where the flowers are all abloom. The energy that the memory and nostalgia brings is particularly evident in the consistently ascending vocal line. Lily's nod toward the mention of, quote, tall, lanky girls in relation to herself is acknowledged in both the vocal and accompanimental line, where syncopation, seen as a sort of awkwardness, appears for the first time. In a performance of this piece, I think it's of utmost importance that the singer imbue the vocal line with an energy that makes the most of the crescendos and decrescendos that are written. The middle section of the song, from measures 9 to 17, marks the climax and is also the most motivated portion of the text. As you can see in the score, un peu plus mouvement, this section initially should move faster as the heroine in the text approaches the high G sharp, accompanied by the words, she reached the top of the meadow. A quick octave descent following the note should be sung quietly, almost in a whisper of excitement and awe, as the heroine sees the field in a bloom in its entirety. Throughout the song, Boulanger implements frequent unwieldy jumps and dynamic contrast between high and low pitches, creating an antithetical event that sounds kind of like tripping, in turn relating back to the heroine of the poem herself, who is uncomfortable in her too large body. Instead of giving the listener what they expect, an increase of volume and increase in volume as we rise in pitch, Boulanger instead cuts the momentum by singing the highest note in a piano or even pianissimo dynamic before sinking to a much lower pitch. The heroine never quite seems to be able to reach the top of the hill entirely with full volume, crescendo, and freedom. She's always brought back to earth and reality by a lower interrupting pitch. This mirrors Lily herself, as she too was uncomfortable in her own body, usually because of its inability to do what she wished in its weakened state. Perhaps in Lily's vision for the song cycle, the first song serves as her dream of being normal and free to explore nature as she wished. Even in her dream, however, before she can reach her own peak, she is reminded once more by her incapable body that she cannot be like others. While acknowledging these deceptive jumps as a recurring motive in the music, it's also essential to sing this first piece with a vitality and spirit that will contrast sharply with the songs later in the cycle that encapsulate the darker sides of Lily's psyche. I'm now going to play for you two examples of different interpretations. The first is by Heidi Grant Murphy, soprano, and I'm just going to play a little bit. And this next example is the same song by Daniel Weeks, tenor, and Naomi Oliphant on the piano.
Elle était descendue au bas de la prairie, et comme la prairie était toute fleurie de plantes dont la tige m'a poussé dans l'eau, ces plantes inondées, je les avais cueillies. Bientôt, c'est à mouiller, elle gagna le haut de cette prairie-là, qui était toute fleurie.
So even though both interpretations are beautiful, to me, the aspects of contrast and variation in tone that Daniel Weeks, the tenor, sings with is more representative of Lily's identity. Though Heidi Grant Murphy's performance is quite beautiful, to me, the colors presented give the impression of extreme delicacy and fragility without really much of any variation. And that's beautiful, but it doesn't encompass the different facets of Lily's energy and happy memories in the same way that Daniel Weeks does in his recording. Moving on to the second song, I believe Lily's view of herself as a woman of both delicate femininity and energy is shown vividly throughout the composition of song number 2, entitled Elle était gravement gaie. The piece begins innocently with a rhythmic 3-bar long ostinato figure of quarter notes in the piano accompaniment. The steady, repeated rhythm creates a sensation of tranquility as we enter the world of a new song. The chords are instructed to be played clair et doux, with a clear separation between each. The voice enters cleanly and collected with a statement about the heroine, quote, "She is solemnly gay," immediately presenting the contradiction in the different facets of her personality. The first section ends with the words ma pensée, meaning my thoughts. The vocal and piano line continue to move in relative cohesion until measure 12, where the two lines separate from each other onto 2 different tracks. At this point, the accompaniment devolves from the steady consistency of straight quarter notes into a complicated rhythmic bouncing exchange between the right and the left hand. The transformation of the accompaniment is indicated to be played expressif et très fondu, which means expressive and very melted, which is a distinct change from the earlier clean charge of notes. As the chords begin to melt together, the narrator is swept away once again by a memory of flowers, in this case, the natural beauty of yellow and blue pansies. The final words of the song, Tu pensais, show a direct correlation to the final words of the A section. Here, we have the same spelling of a word, but with a different meaning, now being defined as the word meaning pansies. There's a distinct connection here between the two words, and Lily emphasized the relationship in her writing. Interestingly, pensée, meaning thoughts, is used here specifically in the feminine form of the word, which ensures that it will be spelled and pronounced exactly the same as the word pensée, meaning pansies. In her text setting of the music, I argue that Lily purposefully wrote them so that they would be pronounced in the singing the same way as well. Her careful setting of these two words could demonstrate that Lily once again saw herself as the flower mentioned, the delicate pansy, delicate but full of mirth and desire. Both were important components of Lily. Though many tried throughout her life to oversimplify her identity by insisting on a one-dimensional definition of a chronically ill girl, it's clear in Lily's portrayal of this poem and song that she saw herself as more than that. The third song of the cycle, Parfois je suis triste, metaphorically depicts Lily's sustaining relationship with her compositions, showing both the joy she encountered while writing and the sorrow she felt when unable to physically compose. In this piece, we experience the narrator speaking directly for the first time about his emotions, as in the past two songs, he focused entirely on describing the heroine. In this initial mention of the narrator's own feelings, we see a juxtaposition of sadness with sudden happiness upon thinking of the heroine. As the narrator describes his anguish in the vocal line, the piano accompaniment plods underneath with depressingly monotonous quarter notes. As the thought of the heroine enters the narrator's mind, the accompaniment abruptly changes into a flurry of harp-like arpeggiated 30-second notes, additionally with a change in tempo as well to plus animé. The narrator expresses the joy that he feels with her. I believe that the joy that Lily relates here for herself is actually a metaphor for the sheer bliss she experienced while composing. Even when she was most depressed due to her illness, music was always her salve. The accompaniment evolves once more at measure 12 with instruction to play plus animé encore, again, and the piece seems to elevate even more toward rapture. However, the joyful music comes to a sudden halt with the dissonant chord at measure 14, which you can see here, bringing the narrator once more back to reality with the given articulation of douloureux, meaning painful. The text shows that the narrator has sunk back into the low of depression. The music here seems to show that what was most often painful for Lily as a person were the sudden crashes of the intense highs that she had felt while composing or being with her friends. There's a notable descent in the overall shape of this section. The heavy dissonant chords on the downbeats of measure 14 and the four measures following represent the immense weight and burden of Lily's physical illness. At measure 19, we see the lowest note of the piece, with the indication that it be played an octave even lower than what was written. From here, the vocal line fades into the piano accompaniment, sweetly alternating between octaves of C sharp, which almost seems to symbolize the tears falling from the narrator's eyes. Here, once again, is an interpretation of this third piece by Daniel Weeks tenor.
Je suis triste et soudain je pense à elle. Alors je suis joyeux. Mais je redeviens triste de ce que je ne sais pas combien elle m'aime.
Again, Daniel Weeks sings in a way that accentuates the contrasting sections and the moods of the narrator, using stylistic choices like a faster tempo, at times accelerating and then abruptly relaxing. The forte dynamic, which he chooses to sing at tempo 1, very vividly paints the pain felt by the narrator. By performing the music with diversity of tone and range of dynamic, the emotions of Lily Boulanger during this time period come to life for the listener. The final song in the cycle, entitled Demain fera un an, acts as a culmination of the songs that came before it. Boulanger herself insisted in her final autograph copy of the work that the performers sing all these songs with the sentiment of invoking a past that has remained full of freshness. Interestingly, this is the only one of Jammes' poems that Lily altered. She cut some of the text out, ensuring that the final poem ended with darkness and despair, where Jammes had initially intended for there to be hope. Here we see motives from several of the other songs, including songs 1, 4, and 6. Scholar Kyriakos succinctly describes the final number. Demain fera un an, number 13, is a distillation of the ideas presented in the rest of the cycle. As Schubert did in his Winterreise, Lily Boulanger creates a psychological message out of the disparate elements of the 12 preceding songs by interweaving in this last song elements of others. This is not at all the composer's doing alone. The poem itself is also full of allusions to those in the cycle which preceded. At this point in the cycle, the narrator is tired from his journey. He has gone through a plethora of emotional experiences, and now that the heroine is gone, is left only with his memories. This could be related to Lily and her physical exhaustion from the activities she pursued, and her realization that she has reached the end of her life. In this piece, we hear elements of loss, happiness, and anguish as we travel through musical memories of the cycle. The song begins with the vocal part repeating a solitary D with heavy, sparse chords in the piano accompaniment. Together, they kind of create the effect of a funeral march. One can't help but wonder if this is the piece where Lily ultimately confronts and accepts her own fate and mortality. Another repeated tone of B-flat appears in measure 40, reminiscent of the same technique used in Song 6. Just as in Song 6, this repeated tone and relatively bare accompaniment beneath produce a feeling of emotional hollowness and a loss of hope that Lily undoubtedly felt at this point in her life. Throughout this final song, we see the rhythmic accompaniment of chains of eighth notes that was characterized originally in Song 4 of the cycle. In bringing back this accompaniment pattern, one can assume that some of the meaning of Song 4 is also meant to return. Song 4 is specifically interesting because out of all the flower mentions in the cycle, this is the only mention of the lys, or the lily flower, of course relating to Lily herself. While Lily Boulanger may have been the victim of terminal illness for most of her short life, she would not have wanted to be defined in such a constricting way. She went about her life with strength imbued in her by her passion for music, and she used the energy she attained to create spectacular works of musical genius. It's evident in her song cycle, Clairière dans le ciel, that while she recognized the limitations of her physical state, she was still intent on pursuing her musical potential. In her composition, Lily Boulanger grapples with her illness and confronts her mortality while also appreciating the joy music and her relationships gave her. Throughout her song cycle, we see the many shades of Lily through her happiness, fragility, and vulnerability. As interpreters of her music, we must portray all aspects of Lily Boulanger, her strength and her weaknesses, to create a complete work of art that honors her memory. Thank you for listening.